Economy has started the year on a muted note, with both the World Bank and International Monetary Fund revising growth downwards below 1%. There are fears of a downgrade from ratings agency Moody's, and all those factors are leading to a flat, slow outlook for the property sector. For more on this, I'm joined in studio by Shaun Rademeyer. He's the CEO of MultiNET Home Loans. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News this evening. Talk to us about what the property sector is looking like for 2020.
Yeah, like the economy at the moment, it's a slow growth. We're seeing the market below 1 million picking up a bit. And of course, the high-end market is taking some time. Most properties in that market is taking longer than they used to sell. But we are seeing a high competitive nature in the banking industry, which is giving us a bit of a buffer in the industry.
Let's talk about, when you talk about high end and low end, what kind of prices are we talking about? I know you've spoken about below 1 million. I saw a figure of 1.8 million saying that's kind of entry level.
Yeah, I think the entry level is around about 1.2 million. The high-end market is anything above 2.5, going up to 60, 70 million rand. And those properties in the high end is taking time. You're sitting with a 60 to 90 day turnaround time on them. And if the consumers aren't pricing those properties properly, they'll sit in the market for as long as there's no buyers. In terms of the property below 1.2 million, we can see a lot of first-time home buyers coming in, which is great for us as an economy. We can see around about 50% of our applications now are first-time buyers. And with the banks lending, as I said, they have the best opportunity now of getting a loan.
That confuses me a little bit, because one would assume that because of the factors that we've spoken about and a consumer being more constrained than they may normally have been, that there would be perhaps a struggle to access funding from banks and institutions which give home loans.
Yeah, the banks are clear on their mandates, and they are finding the consumer that can afford a home loan. And we've seen a 5% increase in the conversion ratio. So from actual home loans submitted to the bank to what we've been granted versus over the last 2 years. So the banking industry, as I said, are competing heavily for those consumers, the ones that are credit worthy. And that's why we're seeing a high approval rate.
Okay. So let's talk about the legislation when it comes to the property sector. We know that investors in particular are always speaking about their fears around what may happen with the property sector in South Africa, especially when it comes to expropriation. But when it comes to practitioners, there's also new legislation that's been signed in. What's this Property Practitioners Act about? Yeah,
the Property Practitioners Act is an act that's replacing the old Estate Agents Affairs Act, which is a legislation that hasn't been changed for years. And it's important for us to stay up with times, and as well as for the consumer. So the new act is going to give the consumer a lot of protection. There will be an ombudsman created for the property industry. So people that are renting, buying, can be sure that they are actually going to deal with someone that's professional. The estate agents of today will be known as a property practitioner, and they'll be highly qualified in giving advice as well as helping consumers with their transactions.
Let's talk about that type of advice. If someone is watching now, sees that perhaps even though the economy is not so great, it might be a good time to buy property, what advice would you give them?
Well, the advice is to make sure that they can afford a loan. Go have a look at their credit worthiness, have a look if there's any judgments that they need to clear off their name. And it's probably the best time to buy in our market. We are in a slowdown a bit, so it means that the prices are lower. The banks are lending more. So if you're a consumer that was looking for a good deal in the market now, I would advise you to go out and buy a property.
And as someone who's perhaps trying to sell their property, how lenient or how relaxed do you have to be when it comes to compromising on the expected property price that you'd have wanted for your home?
I think the important thing is to choose a proper estate agent. Property practitioner is going to give you an indication of what the prices are going for in your area. They'll give you the right advice in terms of how to price your market or your house in the market. And then, of course, you need to decide if you are happy with that. You can't expect in what we call a buyer's market at the moment that you're going to put your property on the prices that it was a year or two ago. So it's very, very important that you get advice from someone in your area that knows the industry, that knows your area, and you price your property right.
How quickly does a area and a price change depending on what's happening with residents in that area. I've seen in certain areas in Johannesburg swathes of people moving out, saying they're immigrating or moving to other parts of the country, and fears about perhaps the neighborhood and things that are happening there. Do property prices in such areas decrease rapidly, or is there always going to be a middle ground, and what's that maintained by?
Yeah, it's interesting. I speak to a lot of colleagues in the market, and they say a buyer's market to a seller's market can happen within a month. Sometimes slower, sometimes faster. So it's all about what the industry or what the willing buyer is willing to pay, and of course what the banks are willing to loan. So you can't go out and spend 3 million rand on a property if a bank only sees 2 million rands worth of value. You just won't get a loan on that. So the industry can change quickly, and it can change quickly to a seller's market as well. So as demand all of a sudden increases with good news in the economy, people are starting to get jobs, a seller's market can happen very rapidly. So it's very important that consumers keep an eye on this. And again, speak to your property practitioner, your estate agent in your area. They'll give you a clear indication of when this market is going to turn and when's the right time to sell and when's the right time to buy.
So looking at these factors that you've just spoken about, looking at our economy, when do you think that it's going to go back to being a seller's market?
Isn't that the magic question? I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of reform that we need to see happening in the government. I do believe we will continue seeing a small growth in the property sector. It will be nominal, so after inflation, I think the prices will still go down. However, with a couple of good news and some wishful thinking from our customers out there, we will probably see a good market return in the next 3 or 4 years.
Shaun Rademeyer, the CEO of MultiNET Home Loans, joining me in studio there.